Amendment No. 4, Bill, National Assembly Bill No. 45 of 2024, second reading.
Mover. We approach the speaker first. Mover, proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to move that the Public Finance Management Amendment number 4 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 45 of 2024 be now read a second time. Honorable Speaker, this bill again is a very short bill, again amending the Public Finance Management Act around the issues of our debt management. And Honorable Speaker, you remember we did amend the Public Finance Management Act, I think about 2 years ago, setting the thresholds for our public debt. Honorable Speaker, this bill seeks to strengthen our public finance management framework by addressing a number of critical issues. One, on compliance; two, on accounting and governance. And on accounting and governance, Honorable Speaker, the bill in clause 3 provides for the amendment of section 194 of the Act to provide for a framework for implementation of the accrual accounting in government and risk management by the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. And Honorable Speaker, this is meant to improve the accounting standards for better transparency in government. Honorable Speaker, you know, we have been under the cash-based accounting system, and to create that legal framework for moving to an accrual-based system, we need then to have the framework which we are creating now in this bill under clause number 3. Honorable Speaker, clause 2 of the bill outlines the effective dates for complying. As I said, it talks about compliance, accounting, and governance. I've spoken about accounting. And on compliance, Honorable Speaker, clause 2 gives us a debt threshold that I had alluded to, that we did amend in the Public Finance Management Act, requiring that we amend section 50 of the Public Finance Management Act. And if you look at the bill, clause 2A6, to delete subsection 2C of the Principal Act that I'm referring to, that we amended some time earlier. And maybe for the benefit of members, Honorable Speaker, 2C provided for that the provisions of 2A, that the borrowing of the national government referred to in subsection 2 shall not exceed 55% of our gross domestic product in net present terms. And notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 2A, the national government may, in exceptional circumstances, exceed this threshold set under this subsection by not more than 5%, and shall come into force on the date that is 5 years from the date of the commencement of this act. Honorable Speaker, when we did this debt threshold, we set our public debt threshold at 55% of our GDP in net present terms, plus or minus 5. And basically it's plus 5, because minus, you are still within the 55 threshold. Therefore, it says under exceptional circumstances, then your debt to GDP ratios could rise from 55 and maybe to about 60%. But at the time we enacted this debt anchor threshold, Honorable Speaker, you know, we had already passed that debt threshold. Therefore, we needed a transition period under which the national government or the national treasury is obligated to ensure that we sustain our debt levels within that debt anchor ratio of 55 and to a maximum of 60% under very exceptional circumstances. And that is what we are seeking to do in seeking to comply with this particular provision, to ensure that we then set a period that will not exceed 5 years. That from the time this act came into being, which I think was last year but one, within a period of 5 years, by the end of 2027, then the National Treasury must ensure that our national debt levels cannot and may not go beyond that 55%. And therefore, it's important that we do amend this provision Because if you left it like that, Honorable Speaker, it's possible you find yourselves in the year 2037 or 2042 when Robert Mbui wants to run for president. He will now come and tell us 2032. Sorry, I thought he wanted to run in 2042. He says it's 2032, which is very encouraging because that tells me his party leader will not be president by then for Robert Mbui to be running for president. Honorable Speaker, I was saying that on a light note because I know it is possible if we don't put that ceiling in terms of timelines, then it is possible that bureaucrats in government may push that debt ceiling and it remains above 55% all the way to 2032, 2042, 2050. And generations that will come after us will be saying that we are still within the debt ceiling because there was no timeline that was set. And that's why we are saying to have compliance, or rather to enforce compliance, we force the National Treasury to make sure that within this period of 5 years, they do move that compliance level to the levels that were set out in the bill. Honorable Speaker, as I said, it's a very short bill, only 3 clauses, and therefore I have nothing more important to add. And I beg to move and request the chair of the Finance Committee, the Honorable Kimani Kuria, the one and only member for Molo, to second.
The member for Molo.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that this Public Finance Management Bill number 4 be now read a second time. Again, this is one of the Honorable Speaker, I beg to move to second, Honorable Speaker. And before I do so, this is again one of the bills that was referred to the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. This is one of the bills that we have done public participation across the 6 counties and received a lot of memoranda about. One of the challenges, one of the views that Kenyans told us is that they were concerned that this bill would have led to giving Treasury or the executive a blank check to borrowing. And for sure, from the final initial drafting of the bill, that was what would have happened. Because the bill as it is now talks of that 5 years from now, from the enactment of this bill, is when now the Cabinet Secretary will be required to adhere to the 55% plus or minus 5 debt as a percent of GDP in present value terms to report to this House. But a further clause, Honorable Speaker, was saying that that clause will come to effect after 5 years. So essentially, that would have meant that would have given Treasury 10 years, you know, of the time that they would need to come and report to this House, or that they need to adhere to the 55% debt as a percent of GDP in present value terms, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, we'll be proposing again amendments coming from this so that we do not give Treasury again a blank check on this borrowing. Kenyans said they are concerned about the borrowing that could cripple the economy, that increases unnecessary burden to future generations, and they want our debt to be checked. Honorable Speaker, the concern also was about, in addition to the debt that already exists, Honorable Speaker, pending bills should be accounted for as debt. Because what is currently happening, and one of the reasons why we have a cash crunch in the country, why there are many Kenyans who are not feeling money in their pockets, is because some of the developments that we are enjoying, that have seen, the schools that have been built, the roads that have been built, the hospitals that have been built, have been financed by private Kenyans' money, the contractors who have not been paid. The verified pending bill now is in excess of 500 billion shillings, and not to talk about the bills in counties, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, if this money is released back to the economy, Honorable Speaker, we'll see at least a better flow of money in the economy and Kenyans feeling money in their pocket, Honorable Speaker. And people might say, maybe this is not false, this is not true, because it's going to be the big boys who do contract with government that will be paid. But remember, Honorable Speaker, the contractors have employees that they have not paid. These employees have rent they have not paid. These employees support their families, and therefore, when this money does not reach these people, then we get to have that cash crunch, Honorable Speaker, in the economy. This bill also, Honorable Speaker, maybe let me speak a little on the change. This Honorable House passed the debt ceiling from nominal terms, where we knew the debt ceiling was moved it from 6 trillion to 9 trillion, I think, to 11 trillion shillings. But now this Honorable House 2 or 3 years ago now changed that to not just nominal terms, but that debt to be a percentage of GDP, not just a percent of GDP in present value terms. So which means that when you are calculating our loan liabilities, you'll have to discount that for inflation, Honorable Speaker. So that discounting, again, is very important because it shows that for you to adhere to that threshold, that 5%, that money that is borrowed must come to the economy, because we are measuring not just debt, but the effect of that debt on GDP. So where that debt does not lead to a growth of GDP, then you'll consequently see now a rise in the percentage, which will be against this particular law, Honorable Speaker. This law, Honorable Speaker, also is proposing to change our accounting system from cash accrual, from accrual accounting, Honorable Speaker, to cash accrual. But many people are asking, what is this cash and accrual accounting? A very easy example of cash accounting is you record your expenses, you record your liabilities when you pay. So the transaction is cash based. This particular method is usually used by small institutions or by small businesses because it is purely a cash business. So a kiosk, someone who operates a kiosk in Molo on a cash basis will take the cash that was, the supplier will bring stock, the kiosk person will pay in cash and record that as purchases, okay? And then the people will come and buy, they will pay in cash, so we record that as sales. And therefore, very easily, the person is able to calculate what the profit is, or what the sales is, or what the purchases are, and even calculate how much cash they have, how much profit they have. That is cash accounting. So on accrual accounting, talk about a bigger entity that gets supplies on credit and also sometimes sells on credit. So the accrual accounting now will recognize those particular goods that have been supplied even when they have not been paid for, and will also account for when those items are sold even when they are not paid for. And therefore, if you can see that as bigger business cannot operate under cash accounting, why are we operating as a country on cash accounting? We should, and that is one of the challenges we have on pending bills. Because we rely on the exchequer going to the government entity, and then the government entity procuring. So at the end of the year, that money has to be budgeted again and to be accounted again. That's why sometimes we have no record of how much pending bills we have. Accrual accounting also take note of all assets and liabilities. Something that is very difficult to do, that is not done, in cash accounting. And you'll find that even government of Kenya, if you are asked, how many motor vehicles does the government of Kenya own? How much land does Kenya own? How much assets in terms of buildings does Kenya own? So that information is not available because of the cash accounting system that we use. So we're hoping that now once we move from this cash accounting to accrual system, to accrual accounting, we are going to see more accountability. We are going to be able to verify more how much pending bills are, how much we owe, how much we own as a country, how much assets exist, Honorable Speaker. And it has been seen as one of the best practices, Honorable Speaker, globally. So I really urge this Honorable House to really support this bill. I want to assure you that as we are proposing, the amendment is not passing a blank check to the executive. In fact, it is putting them more to account that the debt that they borrow must be used to grow our GDP. And we are clearly providing a timeline in which they should come to this house and report and show proof that they had actually adhered to the 55% of debt as a percentage of GDP in present value terms. The migration from cash to accrual is something that the accounting profession has discussed over the years. You go to some, even public schools, for example, you find one of my public secondary schools had a debt pending bills of 30 million shillings. And we were asking, how does a day secondary school get to 30 million shillings as their outstanding debt? So when you called the suppliers, someone is saying they supplied milk worth 5 million shillings. Then you're asking, how can the only people that consume milk in the school are, for example, maybe the principal and the teachers. So is it not possible that a school that not give the students milk would incur such bills? You ask them for receipts, nothing, because even our schools use use cash accrual system. So we are really urging all government entities, Honorable Speaker, this is one of the matters that will see a lot of resistance from our accounting officers, because they would not want to change that system, because it gives a national treasury, it gives anyone in this country that wants to go and check the financial health of a particular institution there. Just the same way, if you want to buy a business, if you go to a bank, you are able to clearly tell what the strength of the asset is, what their debts are, what their abilities, and what their even profitability is. But because there is no profitability in offering public service, Honorable Speaker, but at least we need to have a clear view of what assets and liabilities our government has, and one of those that has been demonstrated globally to work as an accounting tool is a migration from cash to accrual accounting, Honorable Speaker. And with that, I beg to second.
Honorable members, I now propose the question that the Public Finance Management Amendment number 4 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 45 of 2024, be now read a second time. The Honorable Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to also add my voice to this amendment on the PFM Act. Mr. Speaker, first I want to agree with and support the amendment on of Section 194 of the Principal Act, which is the third clause of this bill, that basically talks about moving from cash accounting to accrual accounting. And I think I've attended a few functions with ISPAC, and I think that's basically what has been their proposal. So I think basically if the accountants of Kenya, chief among them being our leader of majority here, if they think this is a good system, I think it might be a good idea to move our country in that direction. But Mr. Speaker, I have very serious questions about the issue of the Second Amendment, which is to do with the matter of borrowing. Mr. Speaker, previously I think we used to have a system where our borrowing was, I think, a relation between our debt and GDP. Then later it changed. We moved to a fixed figure, and I remember we talked about 7 trillion at one time, went to 9 trillion, then went back again and said we are going to deal with the issue of debt to GDP, and I think it was set at 55%. But Mr. Speaker, I've looked at the way the law is now, and I'm comparing it with the amendment, and I'm asking myself some serious questions. If you look at what 50 says, and that is on the obligations and restrictions on national government guaranteeing and borrowing, 2C, it says that the cabinet secretary shall not later than 5 years from the date of coming into force of subsection 2A and 2B take measures to ensure that borrowing by the national government complies with the threshold set out in subsection 2A. Now, the proposed amendment reads very similarly, that now the CS shall not later than 5 years from the date of coming into force of this act take measures to ensure that borrowing by the national government complies with the threshold prescribed in subsection 2A. So I think for me, what I'm seeing is the starting point, because the 5 years is already there. It's already there in law. The starting point. At what point do we start measuring the 5 years? Apparently, if we pass this bill, my understanding is that we start counting the 5 years now. That will take us to 5 years from today. But if we use the previous law, it is 5 years from the date that we passed the law. So what are we doing? We are actually pushing forward government borrowing, within which the period within which they will make sure that they follow the law that is already passed. Because we passed the law, they are not able to do it immediately. So it takes a while before the government can build the GDP and ensure that the borrowing that we've already done is within the law. So that period has started when we passed the previous law. But now if we make this amendment, because it's very similar, we start counting the time from now. That means we are allowing another 5 years from today. And I think, Mr. Speaker, for that, I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think we should put pressure on Treasury to try and do it within the period that is left so that they can be able to balance this thing. Otherwise, what will happen is we'll end up coming back to the House and now putting another fixed figure and saying, now we are pushing our debt ceiling to 13 trillion. We are moving from debt to GDP. We want a fixed figure again. Let us sort it out. Let Treasury sort out based on the law that we have already passed. Let us not give them an opportunity to again increase or extend the time. With that, Mr. Speaker, I submit.
The Member of Parliament for Tetu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to support this bill, especially the amendment with regards to accounting principles. We all know that globally we use the accrual system of accounting, but maybe what the chairperson and the mover of the motion needs to possibly tell this House is how shift from cash to accrual system is going to make the books of the government look. Is it going to, say, for example, exaggerate our debt? Is it going to exaggerate our assets or diminish them? I think I would have expected such a substantial motion being moved. Some scenario analysis would have been put. But Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the debt ceilings, again, I here would support my colleague Honorable Bui, because